Welcome back, everyone. This is the Boston Congress of Public Health. We are doing our 40 Under 40 Public Health Catalyst Award winners and their interviews. We have a new guest with us, Dr. Diana Hernandez. Welcome to the show, Diana.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so, as many of you know, the 40 Under 40 Public Health Catalyst Awards represents the next generation of thought leaders, researchers, scientists, entrepreneurs, directors, authors, who are catalyzing and inspiring us to a more just and equitable world. So I want to briefly introduce Dr. Diana Hernandez, and then she will have the opportunity to tell us more about herself. So she is an associate professor of socio-medical sciences at Columbia University. She's an expertise in a number of areas, but works at the intersection of housing, energy, equity, and much more, as well as public health. She's an expert on energy insecurity, energy justice, and she also has expertise in a number of areas that hopefully I'd love to get into more today, such as social impact real estate, very, very interesting, and then public health leadership, which is something we haven't discussed on the show yet. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dr. Diana. Tell us where you're calling in from, and then some of your passion projects you're working on.
Dr. Carpenter, I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for that generous introduction. I am streaming in from the Bronx, New York, where I am. My family is here with me. My daughter, and my husband are downstairs sleeping, so I get to have a moment to myself, which is rare, but also timed very specifically around this time.
That's awesome. And can you tell us about some of the passion projects you're working on? As I mentioned, you're doing things in housing, health, energy, equity. What are some interesting things that the audience might want to learn about?
So I guess I reduced my response to passion projects. I feel like I live a completely impassioned life, and so it's hard to reduce the reference to my passion projects. But I do have two projects going on. One is a book on energy insecurity in the U.S., which I'm really excited about. I am just coming off of sabbatical. I was able to essentially kind of start the book, put the skeleton together. I have a good sense of where the book is going. And I've enjoyed dedicating time to writing this book and to just kind of exploring with a lot more depth the issue of energy insecurity in the U.S., taking a national view. And I also am the principal investigator on a number of projects, but the biggest project that I have going on, and actually it's the biggest project of my career so far, is a randomized control trial in public housing, where we are testing two intervention approaches to supporting compliance with the smoke-free housing policy that was implemented in public housing in 2018. So as of about 4 years ago, this month, actually, all of public housing throughout the U.S. Banned indoor smoking, so inside of apartments. That mandate wasn't necessarily coupled with resources to support residents to comply. But that has been the focus of this randomized control trial. We're working with a local organization that trains peer educators. And so they're actually being deployed to public housing complexes around the Bronx and Manhattan to help smokers, access smoking cessation services, and then also to have a resident endorsement kind of model where we're really encouraging conversations among residents so that they can understand the kind of potential health benefits, and also address the tensions that are inherent in a policy like smoke-free policies that ban what people can do inside of their homes. And so we're welcoming the difficult conversations, and in fact, as part of the process for collecting data for this project, and I've been working in this area for many years now. It's a constant conversation. And there isn't necessarily a silver bullet, something that, definitely, gets people to absolutely change their minds about this. And yet it really is a critical conversation to have, because policies are often set out, but they are not necessarily coupled with, treating folks that are then subjected to those policies as partners. And so this is kind of post facto, so it's after the fact, but we want to be able to have those conversations with residents to better, to basically support the idea that they would be living in smoke-free environments, but also to support a process around how to get there. So I know it doesn't sound like those projects are of equal weight. In my mind, I spend a lot more time thinking probably about the energy work, but it doesn't preclude the fact that, I get a lot of, I really get a lot of joy from interacting with my community partners. We just did a training 2 weeks ago, and it was really fulfilling to be able to connect with, community folks. I've really come to see my work as community embedded. I've been trying to figure out what's the right terminology. Community engaged basically suggests that there's a partnership, community based, participatory research likewise, but there always seems to be still some distance between the researchers and the communities. And because I am embedded in the Bronx and I have strong ties to an environmental justice community and a community that is impacted by health disparities, I feel like I really am anchoring the work from within. And I think that has been an important distinguishing kind of element of my work throughout the course of my career, in fact.
Such great stuff that you said. And so many different leads I could take. I want to go down, the fact that you worked on this energy insecurity. And so for the audience, say for people who've never heard this term before, what is energy insecurity? And likewise, what is energy justice? And what are the things that you're hoping to elucidate with your book?
So energy insecurity is basically the inability to adequately meet household energy needs. And this is a concept that I developed as a result of spending time in people's homes, actually in the Boston area. And it really became obvious that people were suffering at home in a very particular way. So some people were really concerned about their ability to afford their utility bills. Other people were really kind of struggling with the physical infrastructure of their homes and how they were able to heat their homes or not, or that they had kind of electrical problems and other housing deficiencies that made it difficult to achieve thermal comfort. And I thought it was an important but very under theorized and understudied phenomenon. And I remember setting aside a lot of because this was all based on qualitative research. So many of the quotes and the segments of the transcripts that I had coded as related somehow to energy. And eventually it took me a while to finally publish a paper, but I did publish a paper entitled Understanding Energy Insecurity and Why It Matters to Health in Social Science and Medicine. And that really has kind of set a platform for operationalizing the concept. And then I've done a lot of the foundational research to understand the sociodemographic patterns and other correlates of energy insecurity, including its links to health. And so from my book, I hope to, essentially elevate the conversation, in part so that it is a concept that people are more familiar with. Right now we're in the middle of July, and there was a tremendous heat wave in the UK this week. That is very uncommon. It not only stressed the systems that deliver household energy, but there were also wildfires as a result, and that also can impact how people, the access to energy that people have. And we see that playing out in the US quite a bit. So that wildfires, for instance, on the West Coast, and even very particularly in California, render many of the residents of California energy insecure, not for reasons having to do necessarily with inability to pay, but because of climate stressors. And so part of the concept is also appreciating that this is very much an issue that impacts low-income groups, communities of color in a disproportionate way, people that have medical vulnerabilities, for instance. It also renders many of us that don't present with those issues insecure in a way that food scarcity might. And so I think part of my work is really starting to, essentially broaden our understanding of the issue, and at the same time kind of aim to achieve energy justice. I'm going to stop there because I have to pop my plug in. 1 second.
Absolutely.
So I'll just kind of answer another question that you might have, which is, what is energy justice? And energy justice is the kind of more ambitious version of energy insecurity. And so if energy insecurity is the problem, energy justice is, kind of an approach to a solution. And energy justice, at least kind of as it's been theorized, is really kind of comprised of 4 components. There's a distributional component, a procedural component, a recognition component, and one around kind of corrective or reparational justice. And the work that I do around energy insecurity is really on the recognition side. It's kind of putting a name to a phenomenon and appreciating the problem, and for whom, what populations are disproportionately impacted, and what are the kind of after effects and other consequences, especially the health consequences of this phenomenon. But, kind of thinking about how we get from recognition to reparations and correctional justice is to appreciate how, populations are disparately impacted. So that's a distributional aspect. What procedures really make it so that it is difficult, sometimes impenetrable, it feels like, to have support for people that are disenfranchised and unable to meet their energy needs, right? So that's a regulatory aspect. That's how markets are configured, and where, energy isn't necessarily guaranteed. It's not considered a basic right, albeit really a kind of an undergirding for health as a human right, or housing as a human right. Housing is inoperable in modern society without access to energy. Likewise, health is impossible if we can't achieve healthy and comfortable temperatures at home, because it can actually lead to fatal consequences, and it does, especially in extreme weather. And so part of that is those are the kind of anchor pieces, and then it's understanding, well, what needs to get done in order for people to be, kind of set along a better path. And by that, it would be, targeting communities, especially communities of color and communities that have been disenfranchised and disinvested in from an energy perspective. And rural areas come to mind. People living in mobile homes come to mind. There are many ways that, policies, you can set a path for redirecting resources to take on those more corrective qualities. And that's what energy justice really is about. And as I've come to appreciate nuance, I think one of the things that we don't focus enough on in the energy justice space is integrity. Because unless we operate, and that's those of us that are championing issues of justice, unless we function and operate with integrity, we really lose an opportunity to be examples of what it is to operate and to call for and to hold true what justice really is about. And it's a humanizing ambition, and it's also an ambition around kind of operating equitably, meaning that people are given their due, and that is something that has more recently been an important kind of area of focus for me. That there is a little bit of a moral quality, and kind of there's a character. There is a call for a higher character building in this work that I think we don't do. And I guess this is connected to the whole public health leadership, kind of aspect that you highlighted in my bio. I'll just say that to be a leader, you have to be able to lead yourself first before you lead others. And leading yourself is about understanding like who you are and what matters to you, and also having high standards for yourself that you honor and you keep. And then you can, once you've learned to manage yourself, then you can have those goals for other people. And other people will trust that the vision that you're setting forward is an important one, and that you're a trustworthy enough person to kind of show them the way. And so I often think that my life is full of alignments. I grew up in subsidized housing and Section 8 housing. I now study what the possibilities are for intervening in affordable housing so that it could live up to its kind of highest potentials. But I do that in many ways because every day I strive to live up to my highest potential. And sometimes I'm like surprised by what that has been. I'm also really curious about how far I'll go. But ultimately, the real essence of what I'm trying to achieve is a higher ground for me and a higher ground for people that look like me, that are younger versions of me, that are older versions of me, that are me in the collective, that are really about the essence of representational leadership and how important that is for showing other people that they can be and that they are a lot more than their circumstances.
Wow, that was great. There's so much that you covered there, and letting us know what energy insecurity is, energy justice. You being an innovator in the field, and helping to operationalize this. And then I love the expression, that you used, from recognition to reparations, and you, as you said, being more part of recognition. But then you also started getting into your public health journey, and where you grew up. Can we dive a little bit deeper into that about was there a moment or a collection of moments that you feel may have inspired and or catapulted you to doing the work that you're doing now?
I think in hindsight, so many things are clear. In the journey, sometimes it's very difficult to appreciate, just the role of different experiences. I can tell you that I do have very vivid memory of sitting in the hallway at 1041 Finley, where I grew up, and just thinking about if I somehow reconfigured this floor and I was able to make more space for my family, how would I reimagine the physical layout of this floor plan? How would I make more space for me and my family? And I don't know why that was such a driver for me, but I do remember spending quite a bit of time just imagining a different physical future, and just kind of daydreaming essentially. And then eventually, my parents divorced, and my mom purchased a condo. But that condo was subsidized by the local government. It was also a testament to so much advocacy work on the part of community leaders that just reimagined the physical form of the South Bronx. And they wanted more than rubble. They wanted more than burned down buildings and dilapidated structures. They wanted home ownership opportunities. They wanted to rebuild, and they wanted to stay. And I'm really grateful in many ways that was a part of my life, that I got to live in a beautiful brand new condominium where the intention was so deep. And I also appreciate that when I was, basically I went to college and I lived there, and then I graduated college at 19, and I started a PhD, and I became a homeowner, and I started my PhD at a very young age. And in some ways, again, I could tell my story from a housing perspective any day. I could talk about how I used scholarship funds for a down payment on a house. And back then, housing was much more affordable, even as my income was a fraction of what it is now. But it was also then that I got a disconnection notice, and that I was routed to the Cornell Cooperative Extension Program, which had not only did it give me access to the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, it also provided access to the Weatherization Assistance Program, and provided an educational component so that I can understand more about energy savings. And in some ways, it's I'm not only the client, I'm the player president, as Biggie once said. And so in some ways, I very much was a beneficiary of LIHEAP funding. A disconnection notice was a signal to the utility company that I might be struggling with paying my utility bills. And as I don't recall it being I can't afford this particular bill. Of course, that was 20 years ago. But I do remember feeling relief by the idea that I could get a discount and that I would be spared from a shutoff. And so I had no idea going into sociology that would basically be in some ways so important to my understanding of the different people that I have interacted with then over the years. But it has been obviously. Fast forward, I basically almost dropped out of my PhD program, but for the fact that I had a very good mentor who was like, Diana, take this project on. I would do it, but I don't have the time. And I just went in with a real open mind about just doing work and, kind of answering a question that was really about what's the impact of medical legal services through what was then called the Family Advocacy Program, what is now known as the Medical Legal Partnership, to address different socio-legal issues that ultimately impact health. And I answered that question. I designed the study very much in the spirit of evaluating that program and asking kind of an open set of questions. I relocated to Dorchester, and then I started to ask questions and visit people in their homes. And it was both the observational aspect, and in some ways the observational aspect being so reminiscent of how I grew up, essentially. And then just kind of asking people open-ended questions and being willing to appreciate that there was something there that hadn't necessarily been captured in the literature and trusting that intuition. That whole combination of things really led me to uncovering an issue that I think for the most part, I can't claim having coined the term. I can claim having developed it and, kind of done substantial empirical work around this. And I credit a curious mind and these personal experiences that made something that might have been really unfamiliar to someone else, kind of growing up under very different conditions and coming to their academic work under the very different circumstances and trusting that what I was observing was truth and that I still have, and I do feel this, an obligation and a special responsibility to share that with the world.
I think that is such a riveting story, and the serendipity throughout it, from you being young and reimagining and reconfiguring your physical environment to almost dropping out of a PhD, but through as you said, a curious mind, an openness to essentially allow the seeds that have been planted throughout your life to help guide you into the work that you're doing. So such a powerful story. And I would just say with the other, other interviews that I've done, lots of different themes continue to arise, many things that have happened where researchers, scientists such as yourself, entrepreneurs, et cetera, that inspiration, was basically sparking a number of times because of their own particular journey, similar to yours. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about social impact real estate. I find it a very fascinating thing, and I think it's related to what you're saying, that you're embedded in your community, and this is how you help your community and help to conduct research. So tell us more about that.
I'll give you a feeling. So I remember coming back so I grew up in New York City my whole life, and then I went to college here, and it wasn't until graduate school that I, was in a very different environment. And I remember coming back to New York City and feeling utterly ashamed, especially about just how chaotic and gritty the Bronx is. And it's always been that way. It continues to be. It is perfectly imperfect, and I'm okay with that. But I could also see how the outside world, especially, back then, like just having a different orientation to not just the place, but also the vantage point, because I have been studying as an undergrad, like issues of sociology and inequality, but, really based here. And then I was based somewhere else studying some of the same things. And I was like, oh yeah, I could see how like an outsider might perceive this a little bit differently. And I struggled a lot with that initially. It was like, I could see why people like move to the suburbs, or why, and like being upwardly mobile and knowing that you have options and opportunities, that you would in some ways abandon the very place that formed you. But I also felt like that was like I thought it was so problematic, right? I mean, if I worked through this to the point where I was like, but yeah, actually there are parts of New York City and the Bronx I absolutely love, and I don't want to live without, like just how musical, this place is, and just how lively it is, and the reminders of humanity, even in the context, and especially in the context of so much need. And I really wanted to challenge the idea that being so upwardly mobile basically meant that you abandoned your home. And that is rooted in academic work, because I was very heavily influenced by William Julius Wilson's work, a Harvard sociologist, who basically, kind of described the concentration of poverty in inner city neighborhoods, and basically talked about that as like the root of a lot of the social disorder that we would come to understand as sociologists, and that even like, kind of have permeated the public health literature on neighborhood effects. And so I knew that there were some limitations in terms of like what my scholarship could do, but I thought that it would be an interesting model to reinvest in my community. My grandmother came to the New York City area from Puerto Rico in 1940. And so my roots in this neighborhood are pretty deep. She like lived and died in the Bronx for many, many years, for decades, in fact. And while I was in college, I read this book by Jonathan Kozol called Amazing Grace, which was actually about her housing complex, the Diego Beekman houses. And I took offense to the writing, not because of the quality of the writing or whether or not his observations were accurate, but more so that the depictions were from an outsider. And I just felt like we had the chance, and I had the obligation to write my own story and write the story of people that look like me. And on my desk and pretty much everywhere that you'll ever find me, I have a little thing that says, write your own story. And I have it in different forms. So this is a similar kind of message and reminder of that obligation. The social impact real estate, though, is a different kind of rewriting of a story, because in some ways it's the little girl in me that wanted to reconfigure space. It's paying homage to the people that reimagined the South Bronx when we had a chance to purchase a condo in the Nehemiah houses. And I have purchased places that were abandoned and that were really in need of repair. Ironically enough, the place where I live now, the family that was living here before me, they had to leave because the boiler broke down and they could no longer stay here safely as an older couple. And so over the last 10 years, I have purchased and rehabbed 3 townhomes and incorporated energy efficiency and solar. And I have just reimagined what these spaces could be. And they went from being abandoned places to being loved back to life. I loved them back to kind of an existence and resuscitated them from, being basically homes without warmth in a very kind of literal way. And now they house families, and they've created opportunities for me to enjoy my family, and to be really connected to my community. And not with the intention of like some outsiders coming in to make it better, which is how like large scale development often happens. But, when I have a rental, like a unit turning over, I put my little sign out that says for rent so I can attract local people. And that's really the goal of this work, is just to offer decent housing to locals, and to have improved the physical form of 3 little houses. I don't think that I'll do more of this work, but in doing that work, I learned a lot about the relationship between, the physical environment and health. And I learned how to be a better manager of resources, including of the time resource and managing big projects and things like that. And so it's been an interesting opportunity to do things in parallel and, to figure out ways that we could build wealth and new models from within our communities. And this was just one example of how to do that.
That is so incredibly fascinating. And Diana, social impact real estate, is this something that you just, came up upon your own, had the idea floated around somewhere before, and then also have other people around you kind of taken up a similar, I guess, torch bearing?
So, I think the term social impact real estate, I guess I heard it at some point, but more so like in the affordable housing space. So developers that were using LIHTC, so low income housing tax credit mechanisms to build housing. And the social impact piece was very influenced by Goldman Sachs. And I took a class with a professor who had been, or I just audited the class, who had been at Goldman Sachs and then was teaching at Columbia Business School, and then eventually became the deputy mayor, Alicia Glenn, here in New York City. So I guess I don't operate on a big scale. So, I don't pretend to be a large scale developer or anything, but that's where I've heard that term kind of circulating. Have I inspired others to do the same? I think when I was really pushing for people to do this, I was probably misinterpreted as like a gun-ho capitalist, which I'm not. And so I think that some people are living this and they're doing it and they buy houses and, or they buy their own personal homes. But I think what really has changed in the last 10 years is that it's impossible now for most people that even have decent professional incomes to do what I did 10 years ago. And I think that's a shame. And so I think even if people want to stay in this community, it's financially like difficult, if not impossible, because it's just unaffordable. And that affordability like component just wasn't as true in the past. And now it's just like totally out of control, not just in a place like the Bronx, but really around the world and around the US for sure.
Well, I will say that you have inspired me. I love the idea. I do hear what you're saying about the affordability of it. But I love just the idea of being able to make an impact for those people who are interested in doing real estate, in doing development, and having that. There are obviously certain codes that one has to abide by, but then there's that higher level, right? Knowing these issues that you mentioned about energy and security and other aspects that may not be codified yet into how housing is prepared. Dr. Hernandez, as one of your last questions for the interview, you are part of the 40 Under 40 inaugural cohort 2022 Public Health Catalyst Award winners. Where do you see this cohort going now, in the future, and future cohorts to come?
Well, first of all, I just have to say what an incredible honor it is to have been recognized and chosen. Obviously, the 39 other recipients of this kind of distinguished honor, are doing amazing things in their own right. And so I'm really honored to, kind of be in their company. And for, the Boston Congress of Public Health to basically have thought to kind of elevate those of us that are doing things while we're still young. I have to say that I'm really grateful because I'm 39. And so that might make me a little older than some of the other recipients. And I'll be 40 in September. So this is like the best gift ever. In answer to the question around, where do we see? I mean, I really, what I love about public health is that many of us come into public health by fortunate accident. It's not uncommon for me to hear people talk about, like they didn't plan a career in public health, but here they are. And I can say that is true for me. What I see in the cohort and what I hope for the cohort is that, we will continue to shine a light on whatever aspect of public health. And there's so many different things because ultimately everything is health, that allows for our generation, generations that came before us and generations that come after us to live our best lives, to be healthy, that, that our zip codes, and that other kind of social indicators don't have to be the determinant of our ability to live well, to live healthy, long lives. And so if there's anything that I wish for this cohort is that, we continue to have the fortitude to move forward, to push boundaries, and to keep going, so that we kind of are path breaking in our own generation, but that the generations that come after us are able to reach even newer heights because we've laid a foundation in the ways that we have also benefited from those that have come before us, and they have laid foundations for us to then build onto.
I love that. And we'll conclude the interview there. So for the audience, if you want to learn more about Dr. Diana Hernandez, please go to bcph.org 40 under 40 to learn more about all of the wonderful work that she's doing. Keep an eye out for her book on energy insecurity, as well as her research projects on public housing. And if you want to learn more about different areas of public health, as well as social justice topics, visit us at hphr.org. HPHR Journal, formerly known as the Harvard Public Health Review, and consider being an author and publishing with us. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Diana.
Thank you.